Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Okay. I apologize for not turning the camera on, but apparently there is something that does not let me turn it on. I tried several times, but I cannot. So I will go without the camera on, unfortunately. So I hope you don't mind that. Let me introduce myself first and then move on. My name is Armela Panayoti. I am based at the University of Laura, Albania. I am the project coordinator for Morin. Morin is a multi-country project that focuses on mobility recognition via learning outcomes. We are a consortium of 8 partners, mostly from the Western Balkan countries. We've got partners from Albania, Kosovo, Serbia, North Macedonia, and one EU partner, that is the University of Olomouc, who are also hosting the event. So they have basically organized the facilities for the Zoom license that is basically hosting this event today. This event is organized in the framework of Work Package Do within the Morin project. This work package focuses on learning outcomes, how to conduct recognition procedures for mobilities for studies using learning outcomes. We have already had 2 webinars focusing on the importance of learning outcomes for the recognition of study periods abroad. And because we had, let's say, very positive feedback and also willingness on the part of our partners to organize another webinar, here we are again. What is the purpose of this webinar? To be more specific, I would like to point out that in the framework of work package 3, which has already started, so we started in July, we have planned to prepare a useful document which we call guidelines for academic recognition via learning outcomes. So basically the document will be a user-friendly document that will help colleagues from the Western Balkan higher education institutions, but not only, to think about the learning outcomes in terms of aligning them with courses overseas, meaning courses offered similar or you know, quite related courses taught overseas that would help academics to conduct recognition procedures more smoothly. So basically, the document will focus on that. And besides this document, our colleagues from the University of Niš, the University of Niš is part of the project, and they are in this project in the capacity of a partner that is offering expertise in this regard. They also developed a very useful manual in which they provide concrete examples regarding how to properly write, let's say, these learning outcomes and introduce these learning outcomes into our course syllabi in order to provide for, let's say, for some global dimension or global perspectives, international dimensions into our courses. So without losing much time, I'd like to introduce to you today my colleague and dear friend at the same time, Professor Jasmina Đorđević from the University of Niš, who's one of the authors of this manual, and she will be, let's say, leading this webinar. She will provide her expertise, and we look forward to listening to her. And I kindly invite all of you to engage in discussion and to ask questions if you have any, because we are also looking forward to the Q&A session so that we can better address everything that you might have, any queries or any other doubts that you might have in the meantime. Okay, so the floor is yours, Jasmina. We are all looking forward to your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Armela, very much. Just a short question. Can everybody hear me correctly? Just a confirmation, please.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you then. Very well. Well, as Armela has said, I have prepared a 45-minute webinar for you, which is focusing on writing learning outcomes, which is one of the, let's say, major activities that we are engaging in within this project. So before I start, my name is Jasmina Đorđević. I'm an associate professor at the Faculty of Philosophy, University of Niš, Serbia. And the University of Niš is one of the partners within this project. And as far as learning outcomes are concerned, we agreed at some point that it might be a worthwhile idea to focus on the, let's say, practical approach regarding how to write learning outcomes. So I would just now like to share my presentation with you. Okay, and let me just see. You should be able to see the entire screen. Could you please confirm? Just somebody?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
very well, thank you. I am not able to open all the various tools that may help us engage during the presentation. So if anybody has an urgent question for me during the presentation, you are, of course, free to just unmute and speak directly. Or you can alternatively wait for the Q&A session, which I planned for the end of this presentation. So to start with, as you can see from the very first slide, I'm sorry, I'm a bit losing my voice because I've had classes during the morning, so it's been a rather busy day. So writing learning outcomes, as Armella introduced, it's within the project Morin, which is focusing on mobility recognition for integration. And before we start, I would like to just introduce you with a very basic outline of the presentation. I would like to share a few thoughts within an introduction first, then introduce learning outcomes, not from a theoretical point of view, but rather from a practical point of view. Then I will share several examples and give some concluding remarks, and then we will have time for some questions and answers. So basically Q&A session at the end. And before we start, I would like to just provide a short introduction regarding the motivation for this webinar. As Amela said, we prepared, my colleague and I from the University of Niš, we prepared a manual which is supposed to give some practical advice on how to focus on learning outcomes, how to write them. And then when we discussed webinars, we kind of agreed within our partnership that it might be a good idea to have a practical presentation regarding the writing of learning outcomes. So basically this webinar is, let's say, some effort that we would like to invest in this writing of learning outcomes, because it turns out that everybody knows what learning outcomes are, but when they are asked to write them, they kind of struggle with the specific wording, with how to start writing. I'm sorry, I would just briefly like to check the chat. All right. So, okay, this is nothing for me. I just keep having the pop-up window appears, so I was just curious to see whether there was something for me. Okay, I will ignore it from this point onwards. So, moving back to our presentation, learning outcomes and basically writing anything that includes planning for teaching, planning specific steps during your teaching, includes a certain structure. Now, when we worry about what structure to implement, we should basically rely on somebody's ideas that have been checked, that have been verified, and that have been considered relevant for quite a long time. And in this respect, probably a good starting point is Bloom's taxonomy and also Bloom's revised taxonomy. Now, theoretically speaking, these are, let's say, two different things because two different authors actually worked on them. So the first author obviously is Bloom, and he suggested his first version of the taxonomy, and then later on, let's say his disciples more or less revised it a little bit. It's still the same thing, and I will show you in which way it was revised, but it's still Bloom's taxonomy. So we can talk either about his taxonomy or his revised taxonomy. It doesn't matter. The point is the same. So what is it about? The taxonomy is meant to basically provide the major guidelines to follow when planning an education procedure. And when we say education procedure, what we are implying is anything that includes our work in the classroom or in a certain teaching environment, teaching and learning environment. So the procedure can apply to the curriculum, it can apply to the syllabus, it can apply to the lesson plan, or it can apply to a single activity. So somebody's microphone is unmuted. As I said, the procedures can be different. We have obviously the curriculum as the procedure that is introducing us into the whole study program that we are, for instance, teaching, but we can also talk about syllabi. And as I said, the lesson planning and the lower, or let's say more smaller activities that are included in our lesson. Here, we have to rely on the fact that we always base any procedure, education procedure, on a set of learning objectives. So the first thing that we envision is the objective. It is what we have in mind. And here we have to learn the difference between the objective and the outcome. And we are talking about the outcomes today. So I will get back to that one. I'm just introducing this notion so that you know that we are going to talk about it. Another very important thing is that Bloom's taxonomy, or Bloom's revised taxonomy, is still considered quite essential, and probably the only, let's say, way to structure and to understand the learning process. Basically, there hasn't been anything better than that since then. So we rely on something that is good. Somebody might say it's outdated. Somebody might claim that new things need to be introduced, but I hope that they will, whoever wants to, will come up with something better. And we will, of course, adopt it if we realize that it is better. For the time being, we have Bloom's taxonomy. The focus with Bloom's taxonomy is on the cognitive domain, because every single learning process implies that we want to, let's say, achieve a certain outcome, a certain goal that we set. And that's something that we wanted to achieve depends on the cognition of our learners. So we have to target the cognitive domain in order to deliver successful teaching. And in that, when we talk about that, Bloom suggested 6 categories of thinking skills, which he saw as a kind of continuum that he ordered from lower order to higher order thinking skills. So here again, we introduce a new term, which is thinking skills. I had a colleague 2 years ago say something horrible, in my opinion, because when we talked about exactly these same things in a different environment, obviously, I said that we have to target our students' thinking skills. His response was that his students weren't expected to think, his students were expected to do what he told them. Now, I don't know whether you are as, let's say, horrified as I was when you hear something like this, because a teaching process cannot be a teaching process if there is no thinking. And we as teachers are not the only ones who are supposed to think. Our students have to think as well. And we should be able to differentiate between the thinking skills that our students have or should develop if they don't have them. But obviously at the level that we are teaching at within the higher education context, we kind of assume that we get students who are able to think. So basically what Bloom insisted on was that there were lower order thinking skills, which he identified as knowledge, comprehension, and application. And the progression goes from acquiring knowledge, turning it to some comprehensive understanding.
Gillian?
And then, sorry, was there something for me? Okay, I guess not. So we turn the knowledge into something that the students hopefully comprehend, basically understand, and then are able to apply. So this linear progression, knowledge, comprehension, application, is considered, these 3 are considered belonging to lower order thinking skills. Higher order thinking skills, according to Bloom, progress or basically develop after, obviously, the lower order thinking skills have been developed, established, etc. And they are analysis, synthesis, evaluation. Again, the progression goes in that direction. So we have as we said, with the lower order thinking skills, the knowledge that the students have acquired. Then we have the understanding that they know what they have learned. Then they know how to apply it. Fine. So this is probably the best that we can hope for, but we should also aim towards the higher order thinking skills, meaning that our students are able to analyze what they have learned and be able to analyze new knowledge and then synthesize the new knowledge with the already existing knowledge in order to, again, make new knowledge, so to say, basically having the knowledge grow. And this analysis and synthesis should result in evaluation, which means that the students are able to not only evaluate what they have learned, but also be able to pass that knowledge on, basically tell other people what they have learned. So as teachers, we know that we've gone through the knowledge comprehension application progression. We also know that we've gone through the analysis, synthesis, and evaluation progression. Why? Because we teach. Basically, we tell other people what we have learned. But our goal should be that our students learn that as well. And that is why Bloom's taxonomy is so important, or Bloom's revised taxonomy is so important, because it tells us how to progress, how to achieve both the lower order thinking skills and the higher order thinking skills. Now, this is a comparison between Bloom's taxonomic levels and the revised taxonomic levels, because they tell us basically what changes were introduced in the revised taxonomic levels. So as you can see, the lower order and higher order thinking skills are still there, so nobody touched those. The knowledge comprehension and application, the three levels that I talked about earlier, were renamed in the revised taxonomic, in Bloom's revised taxonomy. So the level of knowledge has been renamed as remembering. You can immediately see that the nouns that Bloom used for his taxonomic levels, or as descriptors of his taxonomic levels, were renamed as verbs. Now, the authors of the revised taxonomic levels thought that it would be better to exchange the nouns with verbs, because they wanted to achieve this effect, to show that basically what our students need to achieve is that they do things, not just have them, but do something with them, which is why they suggested that the taxonomic levels should be renamed as verbs. And the remembering is just a thing that they thought would be better in a descriptive sense instead of the noun knowledge, because knowledge is more general. However, when we say remembering, it means that we have actual facts, actual scientific knowledge, academic knowledge, if you wish. So basically, if we remember something, we will be able to use it later on as well. Comprehension has been renamed as understanding. Somebody might argue that these are all synonyms. Of course, they may be seen as that, but if we talk about the differences between comprehending and understanding something, we kind of see that understanding is a more cognitively involving, let's say, process. Application applying, no renaming there. Analysis, we are now moving on to the higher order thinking skills. Analysis, analyzing, not much as far, so no renaming there, except the fact that we have a verb here. However, the last two levels, as seen in Bloom's taxonomic levels, were evaluation and synthesis. And you remember from the previous slide, they were in a different order. I've just switched the order here to show you that in Bloom's revised taxonomic levels, the authors wanted to put evaluation first and then have as the highest thinking order creating, which was evaluation in Bloom's opinion, but the authors of Bloom's revised taxonomy thought that evaluation is not a word that would specifically address what we want our students to do with all the knowledge. So there is one thing that they evaluate, but what the authors of Bloom's revised taxonomic levels wanted was to indicate that a student has the highest order thinking skill called creating. Now, in the last column, you can see again a list of verbs which basically serve to show you how you can use Bloom's taxonomy or his revised taxonomy in your learning outcomes. Now, we know that when we write our syllabi, we use more or less, let's say, models of sentences. And we focus too much on the same words, always the same words, because that's what we've learned. So we use students know, students understand, students can use, students have the skill or something like that. But if you now look at this list of verbs, you see that there is a large number of words that you can actually use and switch between those words. You can make your learning outcomes more precise. You can make them more specific. You can make them more concrete, because it is one thing to say that your students recognize something, and another thing is to say that they identify something, because the recognizing is more, let's say, intuitive, whereas the identifying includes some thinking. And here you can see that all these skills, recognizing, listing, describing, identifying, retrieving, naming, locating, finding, really nicely describe remembering and knowledge. So instead of saying in your learning outcome, students know, you can be more specific and say students recognize, students learn, students identify, students describe certain things. So they you can use these to make your let's say learning outcomes more specific and focus on the very specific skills that you are targeting in your lecturing. Or for instance, interpreting, summarizing, inferring, paraphrasing, classifying, comparing, explaining, exemplifying, very nice verbs to describe how your students understand. Implementing, carrying out, etc., comparing, organizing, deconstructing, etc. You can see that they are very, very specific in terms of targeting specific things that your students should be able to do. I will later show you in specific examples how you can implement these verbs, but of course you can use other verbs as well. I mean, there are many, far too many synonyms that you can use. What you should bear in mind is that you focus on the taxonomic levels, and that you always bear in mind that what you want to achieve is both lower order and higher order thinking skills. In order to achieve that, you should be focusing on these more specific verbs. Now, this particular outline is provided in the manual, so you don't have to worry about whether you are going to have this or not. So the manual will be shared, and you will have the opportunity to use it, obviously, and there you will also see this particular presentation. And for today, of course, I'm limited in time, and I prepared only a few examples, but in the manual there are quite a lot of examples that you can use as models, and let's say fit them into your own teaching environment, into your own teaching concept, or whatever you want those models to use for. You can actually even copy them if needed. But we all learn based on experiences, and we learn on based on examples. And in my opinion, the best way to learn something is exactly based on experiential learning, because you see how other people have done it. You can see whether what they have done is good or is bad, and then you can say, okay, I like this part, I don't like this part, or basically this part doesn't fit my own teaching, so I won't use this part, but I will use this. So basically you can always model everything to your needs and try to fit it into your own context. Moving on now. As I've said, whether you use Bloom's nouns or the verbs from the revised taxonomy, you should include the suggested vocabulary into your own learning outcomes when you write them, because the vocabulary targets those aspects of knowledge, skills, and competencies that students are expected to have at the end of a learning process. And these three aspects, knowledge, skills, and competencies, are what our project, Morin, focuses on. It is what is suggested by Erasmus guidelines. It is what is suggested by other, let's say, teaching environments, because when you come to think of it, that is exactly what we want our students to have at the end of the learning process. Knowledge, skills, and competencies. Knowledge, it is the framework. Skills is what we've taught them to do, and competencies, how they are going to implement both knowledge and skills. So these three are the basic elements of any learning process. As I said, a learning process or procedure can be the whole curriculum, it can be a syllabus, it can be a lesson plan, it can be a single activity, whichever you focus on. Knowledge, skills, and competences should be the guidelines that you follow when addressing what your students are supposed to know at the end of that process. And the thing that they have at the end will be your learning outcomes. Now, learning outcomes. I am now going to focus a little bit on what learning outcomes are briefly. I'm just trying to introduce a very short presentation here, so there won't be too much, there won't be too many details. Now, what are learning outcomes? First of all, they are statements of what a participant knows, understands, and is able to do on completion of a learning process, which are defined in terms of knowledge, skills, and competence. Now, this is the definition from the Erasmus Plus program guide. And in Morin, we've decided to follow this definition because we agree with it, and we think that it shouldn't be changed. So the difference, now we have to actually establish what the difference between objectives and outcomes is. So to see what we need to learn, how to differentiate between the two. First of all, objectives are the results that we plan to achieve. Basically, if you plan that your students know a certain thing at the end of the learning teaching process, you are targeting the objectives, but the outcomes are actually the results that you project your students will achieve. You can't know. And this is let's say, the major difference between the objective and the outcome. You can plan that your students, let's keep it very simple. I'm a linguist and I work in language. So if I plan my students will achieve 100, I will learn 100 words. That is my plan. But is it realistic to expect them to actually learn 100 words? Or should I project that they learn, let's say, 80 words? And I say 80% is something that I will be satisfied with. And my outcome will be achieved if I teach my students 80 words. My outcome won't be achieved completely if they learn 60 words, but then I will have a percentage of my outcome that I've achieved. If you plan objectives that are too ambitious, you have to risk, let's say, not failure, but you have to risk, let's say, a lower level of achievement because your students are not up to it. Again, we now have to rewind to Bloom's taxonomic levels. If you know what lower order and higher order thinking skills you want your students to have, or you want your students to develop, then you can project your outcomes in a better way, in a more realistic way. Once again, you can have the objective and plan that your students learn, as I said, 100 words, learn to write in 2 different languages, if you please. But then, is that realistic? Is that achievable? Is that doable? But if you project and say, okay, I will be satisfied with, let's say, 60%, then the outcome will be realized. And this is what basically Bologna suggested when introducing the 100-point scheme. So you have the 51% as a passing level, right? So the outcome is to reach 51% because that will be the minimum that you expect from your students. Everything above that is overachievement, basically, because your outcome is the 51%. And the more you realize 61, 71, 81, depending on the grading system in your country, you will achieve more than, let's say, projected, more than planned. And here we come back to, as I said, the balance between the objective and the outcome, the balance between knowledge, skills, and competence, the balance between lower order and higher order thinking skills. So, how do we write those learning outcomes? And here I would like to suggest a very simple tool. The tool is called the ABCD model. Now, this tool, ABCD, was not invented for learning outcomes per se. So it was invented actually for lesson planning. But as I said, a learning teaching procedure, if you please, can be a curriculum, can be the syllabus, can be the lesson plan, can be a single activity. So if it works for the lesson plan, it will work for the learning outcomes as well, because the learning outcomes are the result of our learning teaching process. The ABCD model was suggested by Major, and the acronym stands for audience, or who you are teaching, so basically the A. The B stands for the behavior, or what you want your students to be able to do at the end, your learners. C is the conditions under what circumstances they're expected to perform the behavior. And D is the degree, or let's say the level of mastery, or the extent to what extent they have mastered the performance. Now, this sounds a bit abstract, so I'm going to illustrate it in based on several examples, so to make it more, let's say, graspable. How do we use this? Again, when you think ABCD, you will always think in terms of a single sentence. The single sentence would read, who does what, in what way, to achieve what? So this is your basic sentence. Whenever you write your learning outcome, you start with that. My students know, or do, or write, or think, or whatever, in that and that way, and achieve that and that. And when you read this sentence, you have a learning outcome. Now, audience, the A element, obviously, will not always be repeated because you teach the same students. So it will always be the same audience. But for starters, to make it easier for you, you can always start with the audience. Later on, you can leave this element out because it's always your students. But it depends if you have, let's say, undergraduates or have graduates, or you work with master or PhD students. It makes sense to say that MA students know, think, write, understand, whatever, in that and that condition, to that and that extent. And PhD students know something else. So you think of the level, you think of who your audience will be, and then you attribute the behavior, you attribute the condition, and you add the degree. The degree is, let's say, the grade at the end, or it's the percentage of what you expect them to do, or it's the number of words that they have learned, or if it's a biology class, it's the number of cells that they know how to identify. It's the number of bones that they know how to, I don't know, list or whatever. So as I said, there are various examples. I am limited, as I said, in time. I can't focus on different scientific fields and disciplines today. In the manual, we've tried to illustrate learning outcomes in various scientific fields and disciplines. So for today, a few more words about how to write learning outcomes. A certain number of guidelines should be followed. So once would be, I'm very sorry, I just have to do one little thing. And back, this is a normal situation in everybody's home when you have a family. So things like this happen. I apologize. So guidelines for writing learning outcomes. First of all, you have to align your learning outcomes with your course objectives. It depends what your course is supposed to achieve. So if you are teaching literature, if you're teaching biology or chemistry or whatever, medicine, you have to know what is the final objective that you want to achieve. So basically your learning outcomes are written to achieve those. Another very important guideline is that you use clear and measurable language. One of the clear and measurable language examples are the verbs that I gave you at the beginning that align with Bloom's taxonomic levels. But also measurable language would be numbers if you want a certain amount that your students have to achieve, or measurable language may be the way they do it. They write essays, they write or do infographic presentations or whatever. So it has to be specific. Balanced knowledge, skills, and competences. We said why, we know why this is important. We always have to bear in mind that our learning outcomes should focus on the knowledge, on the skills, and the competences. Of course, you can't always label it as such, but you can think of them in terms of knowledge, skills, and competencies. I will show you later on how you can do that. Again, you have to be very specific and relevant. Now, when we say relevant, obviously, if you teach biology, you can't use terminology from literature or vice versa. Now, these are very extreme examples, but they still illustrate it. Consider Bloom's taxonomy or Bloom's revised taxonomy. Use the verbs, use the levels, use the definitions for the lower and higher order thinking skills. Incorporate real world applications. Now, here is this particular aspect is something that many teachers, let's say, make a mistake with. When they envision certain outcomes, they do not see them in real world applications. Sometimes it happens that some teachers use real world applications that have been outdated, something that doesn't exist anymore, or it can also be in a different way that teachers do not feel comfortable with, let's say, new achievements in terms of ICT technology in general, or if you wish, artificial intelligence nowadays, and they kind of miss this aspect. Now, we live in the world that we live in, and we have to adapt to it, and the world is evolving faster and faster, meaning that the real world applications are changing, if not daily, but at least during the year there will be a change. And that means that if you get a new generation of students, you have to reconsider what you suggested as real world applications with the previous generation, because things might have changed. And of course, review and, as I said, revise every single year should start with a revision, with a review of your own learning outcomes. Why? Because the world changes. It doesn't stand still. Our sciences evolve. Things adapt, things get they simply change, and alterations happen all the time, which means that we have to follow these alterations as well. Examples. Now, in terms of the ABCD model, now I will just make it very simple for you so that you can see how you can start. As we said, audience of who you are teaching. For example, first year students, MA students, PhD students, behavior, or what you want them to be able to do. This can be general. You can say they can read, write, speak, listen to, whatever. But you can also be more specific and say analyze, remember, apply, create, compose, replicate. Now you can see these are the verbs from Bloom's taxonomic levels. Conditions, or as we said, under what circumstances they are expected to perform the behavior. This can be in 30 minutes, in a lab, in an experiment, with a hammer, if you please. So if it's something considering practical work. And finally, the degree, or to what extent they have mastered the performance with 90% accuracy on a scale from 5 to 10, at least 51%. This is measurable language. Now, if we now, at least 51% of correct replies, etc. Thinking skills, how do we incorporate them? The focus on specific thinking skills depends on the projected learning outcome. This means that the projected outcome implies that students remember and understand certain knowledge or apply certain skills. If the focus is on lower order thinking skills. However, the projected outcome will be that students analyze and evaluate their knowledge, apply their skills, and create competently if the focus is on higher order thinking skills. So you basically choose the verbs from either lower or higher order thinking skills, and in that way you adapt your learning outcomes accordingly as far as knowledge, skills, and competencies are concerned. Example number 1. I've chosen a BA course from biology, which focuses on knowledge and comprehension. So my outcome here, learning outcome, is that they know and comprehend. So I've now chosen only these two. And here you can see first year BA biology students identify and define the fundamental concepts of cellular biology, genetics, and evolution in an exam setting, given a diagrammatic question with at least 70% accuracy. As I said, you read it as a sentence. This is the perfectly defined learning outcome. It tells you who your audience is. It gives the behavior, it shows the conditions, and it indicates the degree. So it's very simple. You can go either way. You can list out audience behavior, conditions, degree, and write them out, or you can write out the sentence and see whether you've identified audience behavior, basically the ABCD. And as I said, here the focus is on knowledge and comprehension only, so it's a lower order thinking skill. These are lower order thinking skills. Example number 2, BA biology course with focus on application and analysis. Now we are moving on, so we are at, let's say, the borderline between lower and higher order thinking skills. The sentence reads, first year BA biology students apply the scientific method to design. They conduct basic biological experiments, including data collection and analysis, and draw valid conclusions in a laboratory setting, given laboratory materials and instructions, accurately and with appropriate controls and variables. Again, A, B, C, and D, they are all there. And we are already moving up the levels. We are now going a little bit higher. And here I've used the bold letters for Bloom's verbs. Let's call them Bloom's verbs. Example number 3, BA biology course with focus on evaluation and synthesis. First year BA biology students evaluate and synthesize information from various sources, for example, textbooks, scientific articles, online resources, to form a coherent understanding of a biological topic, given a research assignment with access to library and online resources, to produce a well-organized written, let me just see, report that accurately summarizes and critically evaluates the chosen topic. Again, as I said, A, B, C, and D. They're all there. Now, this is the basic procedure that you can apply to write learning outcomes. However, there may be a more complex one, and the more complex one is the one that we illustrated in the manual. And here I would like to show you one example. It is an example from an MA course in advanced political theory. So we are no longer in the field of natural sciences. Now we are moving on to let's say to the social sciences domain. And here I wanted to present the learning outcomes written according to knowledge, skills, and competencies. And here you have very detailed sentences where the bold letters focus on Bloom's verbs, whereas the underlined parts focus on the behavior and the condition and the degree. Now, you can't include, when you structure them based on knowledge, skills, and competences, it will be very difficult to include all the 4 elements A, B, C, D that we have. A, we exclude completely because we have the audience in the title already. So those are MA students. But you see that you have explain in detail the core debates and arguments within contemporary political theory, including their historical context and key thinkers. Explain in detail will be the behavior, within contemporary political theory will be the condition, and the degree is not included here because we are talking about knowledge. Or, for instance, accurately differentiate between various schools of thought within political theory, such as liberalism, republicanism, Marxism, feminism, and post-structuralism. Here we have the degree included, which is the the various, let's say, schools of thought that occur within political theory. Within political theory will be the condition, the behavior is accurately differentiated, or critically evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of different theoretical approaches to contemporary political issues. Again, we have the critically evaluate the strengths and weaknesses, which will be the behavior. Critically is actually the degree here. So sometimes the degree can be numerical, but often it will be more qualitatively or narratively described. It's also legitimate to do that. Illustrate complex. I'm not going to read all of these. I'm just illustrating. If we're talking about skills, for example, if we want to focus on the skills element, then we can say independently analyze complex political texts and extract key arguments and underlying assumptions. So here, independently is our degree. Analyze complex is the behavior, and the condition will be extract, so under the assumption that they extract key arguments and underlying assumptions. Construct with 90% clarity, well-reasoned and persuasive arguments, both orally and in writing, demonstrating logical coherence and clarity of expression. Now, this is a very specific and very precisely defined learning outcome for skills. So the behavior is construct, the degree, expected degree, is with 90% clarity. Well-reasoned and persuasive arguments are the condition, both orally and in writing. So this includes both the condition and the behavior, because orally they have to speak, in writing they have to write. Demonstrating logical coherence and clarity of expression would be an additional aspect of the degree here. Or conduct independent research, etc., etc. Effectively communicate, etc., etc. And then we have the competences. So the third element that is also very important here, critically engage with diverse perspectives and arguments, demonstrating respect for differing viewpoints and a willingness to challenge one's own assumptions, or consistently apply. Again, you see the behavior, you see the degree, you can see the conditions and the specific circumstances that you expect them to prove the competencies or demonstrate intellectual curiosity and commitment. So demonstration is a really strong word to signify a competence. So formulate, again, a very strong word, as I said. In conclusion, when we think of the lower order, higher order thinking skills scale, let's say, or let's say progression, as I said, we have remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. Now, this is the revised taxonomy because we have creating as the highest thinking skill. What we need to actually bear in mind that every learning process starts with goals and expectations. The goals are our objectives, the expectations are our outcomes. So I illustrated at the beginning, we can have the objective, but is it realistic enough? Are we going to achieve that? The objective is to teach, work with students in a particular way, demonstrate examples and show them how to do something. So that should be the objective for ourselves. And the outcome, if we are lucky, if we've done everything right, or at least most of it right, the outcome is that they know and understand what they have been told, that they're able to do what they have been shown, and are capable of achieving a more or less similar level of efficiency and proficiency that most people in a certain profession achieve. So knowledge, skills, competencies. And here are some resources for you. And now we can start the Q&A session. And I hope that I've been able to illustrate writing learning outcomes within 45 minutes. Now, this is a very, let's say, short way to do it. I have to stop sharing now. So yeah, and you are back. The list is there. I would be happy to hear questions if you have them. You can, of course, either raise your hand or just start speaking, whichever suits you better. So I haven't followed the chat session, I must admit, because I couldn't keep switching between the two windows.
Thank you, Yasmina. Well, the chat session was mainly about technicalities regarding participation. So it was mainly exchange carried out in that thread so as not to interrupt,
Okay,
you.
I
I
can
hope
see
you
that.
didn't
Yeah.
get interrupted. Thank you very much for this presentation. I would like to invite all our colleagues who are present online to perhaps share their views, their concerns. So mainly, basically a simple question would be for them to ask them to reflect on how they write their learning outcomes, whether they have thought of rewriting them along new lines, and whether what you just presented kind of uh, provided more insights for them to do so. So I would like to invite them to report this experience, why not? Or report this viewpoint, if so. And whether they have some concrete questions for you, like in the sense of having thought of a certain formulation and wanting to change it, and how they could improve it. There's a question in the
Yeah,
chat.
I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I leave you to that.
Yeah. So the balance between knowledge, skills, and competencies, it is not easy to balance it. And the question is, can we actually include all three elements in every single learning outcome? Now, that would be unrealistic to expect, but it would be good to decide on which aspect or which element of the learning process we would like to focus on with a particular learning outcome, because not every learning outcome can literally include all three. So when you write your syllabus, you have the learning outcomes in the form of a field, I suppose. I don't know. I'm talking about the Serbian context. When we prepare our syllabi, we have this one field that includes the learning outcomes, where we can put like 4, 5, 6 sentences, which means that not every single sentence can focus on all three elements. But let's say that we balance it out by devoting at least one sentence to each of these elements, and then if necessary, let's say elaborate on one or two, or maybe include more than one sentence for a particular element. It's not easy, I know. This is Aida. Aida, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. The point is that we should at least try to include all three. They can't be measured in a sense of being equally applied or balanced equally. So I wouldn't expect it. I mean, not every course can balance on that. There are courses that focus more on the skills, and there are other courses that focus more on the knowledge aspect or element, if you please. So it depends on the objective of the course as well. So I can think of anatomy students who have to learn every single bone in the body. Now that would be knowledge, but their skill would be to, you hold up a piece of bone and you ask them what is that, and they have the skill to identify it, for instance. So, or the skill of an orthopedics whatever surgeon to fix a broken bone. So it depends on the objective. I hope I either have managed to answer your question.
Thank you very much. Very nice question.
Yeah, very good one.
Maybe we get some more questions like that. We have, let's
don't
give it a little time, like 2 more questions would be perfect.
I don't mind even if there were more, and I encourage
Yeah,
people
sure,
to turn on their microphones if it's easier, so you don't necessarily have to use the chat box. I know that sometimes people don't want to type that much.
Just to pay due respect to the time allocated for the session, we wouldn't like to, to take up more, but if people are willing to stay on and.
I have one question.
Yes, Diana.
Yes, starting also from a previous experience we have with the RESA project when we were supposed to modernize the courses that we had, and we had to rewrite the learning outcomes. And it was a bit difficult to write the learning outcomes because the project leader was comparing our syllabuses with those of the university. And I'm using a word, I had to bring it down a notch regarding the learning outcomes that you are expecting in a university and in a professional college like ours.
Yes.
Is there any specific guideline we need to consider for that is mostly related and it is relatable to the typology of the professional studies? Other than Bloom taxonomy, it is something that might be perhaps helpful if there is any, I don't know, any research or any little guideline or subsection that it is more directing toward professional studies of our kind.
Yes, Diana, I understand your context. I know where you come from. I know what you have to struggle with. But as far as lower and higher order thinking skills are concerned, there is no difference between the professional or academic, let's say, learning setting or environment, if you please. So what you would probably want to do more and focus more on would be the skills and the competences part, where the knowledge aspect might not be, I wouldn't say as important, but it wouldn't be, let's say, a priority at the same level as it is with certain academic theoretical courses, for instance. So this goes along with the previous question. So we do not need to balance them, literally have equal amounts of everything, right? We have to focus on what is our objective. And then even in the professional context, your students need to have certain knowledge, right? But probably the framework, the theoretical framework might not be that detailed as it would be in some, I don't know, academic course. I think of linguistics, for instance. You are not going to teach, if you are working with, let's say, elementary school teachers, they are not going to have to, I don't know, sorry? So if you are working with, as I said, future elementary school teachers, you are not going to expect them to give you a list of different, I don't know, elements of theoretical or whatever discipline. You would like to see them teach. So that will be the skills and the competencies part. So objectives and outcomes have to align, basically. And there is no difference, Diana. You can use all the words, all the taxonomic levels. You just have to cherry pick what is more suitable to your environment, right?
Thank you.
You're welcome, Diana.
Any other question? Maybe a very simple one. How many of you are inspired to rewrite their learning outcomes? I mean, the learning outcomes for the courses they currently teach?
Nobody.
Well, I see the point.
Yeah, Venera just said we do it all the time.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
The review and yeah,
Yeah. Thank
review
you,
and
Venera, for
revise.
that.
Ramadan. Is there any rules that compares the difficulties of lowest level, highest one is 100? I'm not sure whether I understand this, Ramadan. Could you turn maybe your microphone on and elaborate on your question? I'm not sure that I understand it completely.
Hello.
Hi.
So last slide we saw the skills ranking from remember to create.
Okay.
How is the difficulty level of this levels, example, from remember to create one? Can we have any ratio between them?
Oh, but it's impossible to have a range.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you have to adapt
Mm-hmm.
the level to your context. Maybe certain skills levels won't be necessary at all.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't have to follow them blindly. They are just there, and you pick those that are relevant to your own context.
Okay, that means there is no any rule about
No,
finding a
not.
difficulty.
Of course not. You don't have to go, oh, please don't understand it that way. You don't have to apply each of the skills levels and work yourself up and say, okay, 20% for this. And if that is your question, I guess that it is it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just go through those levels in terms of what is right for your course.
Okay.
And you attribute to it or allocate to it as much as you need to, or you don't. You don't have to be specific, you know, because this is a process. You can't define where one step ends so that the other one begins, right?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very abstract, in fact.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anybody else who would like to ask a question? Okay. Armela, you are still there?
Yes, I am. I was typing something. Actually, what I wanted to bring to your attention is something unrelated to learning outcomes, because you know, we cannot identify some participants. It's for the sake of ensuring who has participated in this webinar, since we plan to issue a certificate for participating in this seminar. Then if we don't know who is who, we cannot do that. So this is like another call to kindly ask you to write your full name. I know we are somehow intervening with your, you know, with your privacy, but this is totally unrelated here. It's about participation and representing your institution. So we would like your full name to appear. It's very easy to do it. You just click on your name. So where you see your name appearing on the screen, there are some dots above your name. You click on those dots, and you can view your profile, or you can you have that option to change your name, to rename it basically, and to add your full name and the abbreviation standing for your institution. So that is the only purpose why we are asking for that, so that we know who is who has participated in the event, so that we can let's say have a proper record of the number of participants, and be able to, let's say, give credit to this participation by issuing a certificate. You have one more question in the chat.
Two more, actually. Venera asked who evaluates your syllabi. I don't know, Venera, where you're referring to, my syllabi or to syllabi in general. Because in Serbia, all syllabi, yeah, in general. In Serbia, all syllabi get verified through the accreditation procedure. So basically, when we prepare our accreditation documents, the syllabi get evaluated by a member of the reviewing board. And if they are good, they will pass. If they are not, they will say what is wrong with them. Yeah, okay, I see that the same procedure. And we have Fidan. Could you elaborate on which levels of knowledge are preferred to be used, for example, the bachelor's? Oh, again, it's not something that you can prescribe. The levels are there. The taxonomic levels are there to give you direction, to give you examples, to give you a choice of words that you can use. You don't have to use all those words. So you basically try to fit them in your own teaching, learning context. And if, for instance, you want to focus more on one, then you do. If you want to focus more on the other, then again, you do. But throughout the entire syllabi, there should be a balance, because then we can ensure that when a student, for instance, is engaged in mobility, that they get their courses acknowledged when they are recognized when they come back to their home institution, because it's easier that way. It's more transparent if you make it more, let's say, specific. Okay, I hope that I've managed to answer your question, Fidan. Have I? Yeah, and if you, I can see now that you were referring to that. Yeah. Yeah. Just one more thing, Fidan. If we talk about levels of education like bachelor, master, PhD, everything applies to each according to the context. Venera, you talked about revised taxonomy, and do the experts approve I mean, there are no experts. This is common knowledge. This is something that has been verified throughout scientific research for the last 20 or something years. So this is from research. So this is not.
Okay, I think I will jump in because
Please do.
right now it has become too
Yes, please
difficult.
do.
Okay, so thank you for your presentation. It was really inspiring, and somehow it tackled lots of issues that we deal with in our everyday job. So you said that it will be the agency of accreditation that approves the syllabi, and mostly what they do is that they read, they go through all of them as they do with us. But so far we have been more focused into using Bloom's taxonomy, and you mentioned the revised taxonomy.
Mhm.
So I mean, when you meet with the experts of the agency for accreditation, if you meet, do you meet them face to face? Do you go through the process of having face to face meetings? Because we do have face to face
Yeah.
meetings with them.
Yes, we do. They are
Okay.
mostly, they are mostly online nowadays, but it means that we meet, we talk, we discuss.
Uh-huh. All right. So you're still as in post-COVID
Yeah, right,
situation.
right.
Okay. So my question is, since you mentioned the revised taxonomy, and do you think that they agree to a revised taxonomy instead of using specific Bloom taxonomy, although there were not too many differences or changes into the taxonomy, with the exception of the first two ones. The four others were okay, just using verbs instead of nouns. But anyway, do they agree to this revised taxonomy?
With they, you mean who?
The experts of the agency of accreditation who come for, let's say, who meet with
Yeah,
you
right.
and
But Venera, the point is that you never mention, I mean, you don't have to mention Bloom's taxonomy at all in your
yeah, but when you
syllabi,
write
right?
it down, it's based on that, right?
Yeah,
When
but
you
nobody
write-
asks you who or what you based it on, as long as the outcome is clear and specific. So Bloom's taxonomy is there to help you write the clear and specific outcomes.
Okay,
Because what
okay, the
the-
vocabulary has changed a little
yeah,
bit now with the
right.
revised
But
one.
this is just, let's say, this is just a starting point. The
Yeah,
point is to
okay.
give you direction, as I said. And
Mhm.
Bloom's taxonomy, be it Bloom's or revised taxonomy, doesn't matter. The wording, the vocabulary is brilliant. It helps
Mhm.
you. You know,
Yeah,
I've
of course.
been teaching for 30 years, and I've
Mhm.
learned about Bloom's taxonomy, I don't know,
Mhm.
almost 20 years
Mhm.
ago. It
Mhm.
has helped me a lot because I have not had a single syllabus being evaluated as bad. You
Yeah,
know,
but
and my teaching is better because I follow.
yeah, okay. Yeah, it helps us
progression.
nowadays. Otherwise we were not very much focused into taxonomy at that time when we started teaching
Yeah,
like 20 years ago.
True.
So, all right, thank you. Thanks a lot. Thank you
It's
for
just
explaining.
to help you, you know, maintain a certain direction.
Yeah, I know.
That's
But
it.
it keeps us really busy in
Yeah.
finding.
But thank you for raising this issue, because obviously I believe that there are other people struggling with similar thoughts and worrying. After all, we are more or less in the same context. We all have to, let's say, satisfy the
Yeah.
reviewers in the accreditation, sitting on the accreditation boards, and we all fear their judgment because our institution
Exactly.
depends on their judgment, so to say, right?
Thank you.
So,
Thank
yeah,
you. Thanks a
that's
lot.
it. I get it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we are long overdue. Armella, what do you suggest?
Well, I don't know. Are there any other questions? Well, if not, I don't see your hand or voice, but well, I suppose there aren't anymore. I'd like to thank you very much for holding this seminar, which is an additional activity, an added value to our Morin activities, I must say, because it was very concrete. So basically, it was a nice follow-up of our previous webinars, focusing more specifically and more concretely on how to do it in order to achieve what we have so ambitiously, let's say, proposed to achieve. So I thank you for that. And I thank you all the participants for bearing with us at this hour of the evening. and for raising interesting questions. I'm sure there may be many others, but if they have other questions, they are free to ask us, to ask you directly, or to ask anybody from the consortium, and we will be able to, I mean, we hopefully we will try to address them within the consortium. And in this way, we will also have some feedback, some external feedback that might be useful for our upcoming activities. So with this webinar, we have, let's say, finalized our activities for work package 2, and we can now smoothly move on to work package 3, finalize the guidelines, the manual, and I'm happy to say that we will make these documents available for everybody, introduce them to everybody, to our institutions. So those of you who were present with us today, or anybody else who is interested in learning outcomes, especially when it comes to employing learning outcomes for recognition purposes, are more than welcome to do so. Next year, we will be having other activities. More specifically, we will have a conference, a big conference to be held in Flora in July. And should you have any thoughts or concerns regarding these matters, you are welcome to share them with us. Thank you very much, Yasmina, for this inspiring presentation.
Thank you.
It did provide and provoke some food for thought. So a big hug. And
thank you everybody for being patient and for, let's say, hopefully not wasting an hour and something of your lives. I appreciate you attending this webinar. Thank you very much for it.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Bye. Bye.